Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am authorized to assure you that so far there is no reasonable cause for alarm. The rumors of invading armies and mass destruction are based on hysteria and are absolutely false. I repeat, these rumors are absolutely false.
Welcome to Thoughtspeak, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of K. Applegate's 1996 book series, Animorphs. My name is Coleman.
And my name is Mitchell, and today we've got a very special episode for you, no doubt about that. But first, I am going to go through and thank our Patreon sponsors, all of which were just responsible for even making this show happen. So, real quick, we are going to thank Spencer, Jack Hunter, Ben Freeman, Jennifer Baker, James Miola, Tim Aheen, Kendra, Kevin Kusklowski, Graith, Tony Pazak, Noah Troutman, Dan Zander, Daniel Martinoli, Nita Labrada Gaffaro, Michael Blemick, Sorrent Joyce, and one of our most recent, newest subscribers, the elusive Mr. Sundown. Thank you all so very much. And you know what? One of the benefits here on the Thoughtspeak Patreon page is that if you happen to be a Andalite tier subscriber, you get a certain perk. And that perk is a guest spot on this episode. And that spot goes to Sundown, or as we call him, Richard, our guest for today on this legendary episode. How you doing, Richard?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Surprise.
Yeah,
Surprise.
and I gotta say, there was probably some collusion on which episode he'd be guest spotting on, because you just happened to end up on VISSER, and that took some planning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
As we all know,
anyway.
VISSER is just one of the best books in the series. I think there's no questioning that. It's just, it stands alone on its own tier, I think, kind of like, the Andalite Chronicles, some of the other books in the series, right?
I mean, it's easily one of the bigger ones for me. It's the one I think that you could, you might have to talk around the VISSER stuff itself, but you could put it certain chapters in the hands of somebody who's never read Animorphs and they're just into sci-fi, and I think they'd be blown away by certain aspects. So it's great.
It's definitely the court drama that I always knew Animorphs could be. I've always wanted to see that from this book. Let's see.
Before we jump into that, though,
Yes.
it wouldn't be Thoughtspeak, and it wouldn't be a guest spot episode of Thoughtspeak if we didn't go a little time traveling, Megamorph style time traveling into the past of our guest and found out how he got into Animorphs in the first place.
There you go. Yeah, we love learning about our fans and anybody else, what their Animorph experience was. And I understand that your experience is a little bit different from ours in that we kind of scattered reading the books, but you read it all the way through, right?
Yeah, I started reading the books way back in the day when I was, early elementary school, and picked it up at number 4, The Message. Mainly the Dolphin is what sold it for me. And I read every book month to month all the way through till the very end.
Damn, that's a long ride, a couple years at least.
Very, very emotional, a lot of ups and downs.
And how about your book collection? Were you able to hang on to it for all these years?
Well, the sad story is no. I went and took a year and moved down to Texas, and in that time, my books ended up missing. And I went a lot of years and had a little bit of sadness at the loss of those little pieces of paper that helped me a lot in my youth. And a couple months ago, I decided, you know what? I want those back. And I didn't get my books, but I was able to buy a collection from eBay. And I'm really glad that I did. It got me back into it. So.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, it was a real rush for at least a couple of months, tracking the books down individually, going to used bookstores and stuff. Kind of regret that that's over now. But, hey, my collection's complete at least.
Yeah.
You can always burn your collection and start again.
Or donate it, my God.
Far too lazy for that. I just went to eBay, complete series, click, boom, done.
Yeah, there you go. Well, if you want something, why the hell wait, right? Not in this day and age. So VISSER, boy, it's special, and we know that. And I just want to steer us into talking a little bit about the cover, because this is one cool cover. And you might also have noticed that although the book is primarily about VISSER 1, they have VISSER 3 stuck on the cover.
Well, if you're going to pick between a beaten-up old lady and, one of the most original sci-fi creatures that you have in your series, I think it's a pretty easy... It's a good part of the book is about VISSER 3 as well. It's not really just about VISSER 1. It's just she happens to be the protagonist.
Yeah,
so.
And I think this is kind of, in my mind anyway, like the defining version of VISSER 3, or even just Andalites in general, honestly.
Yeah, well, did you know that there is according to Seropedia, an interesting backstory behind why VISSER 3 appears on the cover? This question has apparently been asked of K.A. Applegate for a long time, and finally she admits that she feels responsible for the mistake. One of the first things K.A. had to do for her book was create an outline for Scholastic. They used this outline to write the summaries on the back of the books and to create the covers and the titles. So that kind of proves a theory, by the way, of something that we've been talking about with how they do these outlines. But anyway, the outlines for the books were generally vague, though, so she wouldn't be so limited when writing them. So for VISSER, she implied in her outline that the book would be just as much about VISSER 3 as it would be about VISSER 1, which led Scholastic to choose VISSER 3 for the cover. But when Kay actually sat down to start writing the book, she found that VISSER 1's story was a lot more interesting, and that's who the book ended up being about. By then, it was too late and too expensive to have new cover art created. So there you go, fresh from the source. That's the story. And you know what? I think VISSER 3 actually has the wrong kind of tail here too.
It's very whip-like.
It's supposedly the. And in fact, it says on Seropedia the inconsistency. The cover. And if the cover Andalite is meant to depict VISSER 3, it differs from his depiction in The Weakness. This depiction has a backwards-facing, scalpel-like female tail blade. So, yeah, there you go.
See, I just saw that as them continuously updating the Andalites in general, because they did the same thing with Stock Eyes, where they just, retconned them when they got to the next book cover.
Well, they redesigned them ever so slightly to not make them look so goofy, I think, because they had the weird, segments, right?
No, the Stock Eyes,
I don't know.
yeah.
I still never thought... I don't think any of the official depiction of Andalites ever really, gave credit to how they're described in the books and how they use them. I think they're incredibly awkward in the official artwork and don't work as described.
Well, okay, one thing we should talk about, though, is that this is the only hardcover book in the series, which is pretty spiffy and special.
That's not true.
No, they had the Harkbajur Chronicles as well.
Yeah, I have a hardcover.
Oh, did they? Yeah, you're right.
Chronicles.
Okay, not the only one, then. My bad.
I mean,
Edit that out, Coleman.
I have a hardcover copy of book number 34 too, but I feel like a library illegally printed that or something.
Yeah, who knows where those come from?
I think this is the only book that was printed exclusively in hardback, though. I don't think I've seen a paperback version of VISSER.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Oh, that could very well be the case.
It could be out there, but I've not seen it. I've only seen hardback copies.
Either way, it's really cool that it's got this flap that, of course, it's removable, as most hardcover books have, and it's kind of not necessarily holographic, but shiny, I guess.
Sometimes those are referred to as dust covers.
There you go. And if you're interested in dust, this little thing is called a dust buster.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and... Or actually, you know what? For special guest purposes, Richard, are you capable of reading the inside cover flap description of the book?
I believe I can do that, yes. But I just wanted to point something out because I just noticed it and I thought it was kind of cool. If you flip over to the backside, one of VISSER 3's Stalk Eyes is turned around to look at you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is true.
In my entire childhood, I've never noticed that.
Me neither. I literally just noticed it when I'm holding the cover of the book in my hand. Yeah.
It's just bright enough to think.
Emails about that we're gonna get.
It's just bright enough to mistake as a star if you flip over and it's like, oh, okay, it's from reverse. Cool.
Yeah, that's kind of neat.
Huh. You're already adding to the quality of the show.
Oh man. Glad to be of service. So which part do we want to read? Do we want to read the whole thing, or do we just want to read this bottom section?
Yeah, the starting with her human name is Eva.
All right.
Yeah.
Her human name is Eva. There was a time when she had a loving husband and a son, Marco. When she had a wonderful career, but that was before she was infested by Edris 562, before the invasion of Earth. Now, Edris 562 lives in Eva's head and controls her every movement. And through Eva, Edris has become the highest-ranking general in the Yeerk Empire, surpassing even her arch-rival, VISSER 3. She is VISSER 1. But it has become known that VISSER 1's tactics for attaining her current position were less than acceptable, even to the Yeerks. Now she is on trial for treason. If she's found innocent, she'll continue to rule, but if she's found guilty, she'll lose her life, and possibly the life of her host, Eva. Well, which will mean that Marco will never, ever see his mother again. Kay Applegate has dared to journey to the dark side with this haunting glimpse into the hearts and minds of a race determined to survive and conquer at any cost.
I love that last part. Kay Applegate has dared to take you on this journey into the dark side.
Exactly. Well, we're very thankful that she's extended an olive branch and brought us along, because, yeah.
Real quick, would you say this book is the equivalent of, like, Oscar bait during the Christmas season? Did they release this in hardcover trying to get one of those, like, Peabody Awards?
Jeez, I don't know what they were really shooting for, other than the Megamorphs and the offshoot Chronicle books had been so successful and popular. I think this is just their next, and I might even say their most well done version of that. Possibly besides Elemis Chronicles.
It's definitely one that I have reread the most out of the series. Like, even when I'm not doing a series read-through, occasionally I would pick up VISSER and just read it again. So, you say that for it, at least.
How many times have you read it, Richard?
Oh, geez. Including this week, it's probably been 5 or 6, to be honest with you. It's definitely one of my top books in the series. It definitely stands apart from the rest.
Yeah, exactly. Even though I've only read it like twice, it's one that really sticks with you. And man, it's just got so much good stuff. You want to jump in? You want to start? You want to break it down?
Let's talk about the book itself, the words within the book.
You betcha. Well, this one opens with a little brief prologue-y kind of scene that takes place around the time when VISSER 1 is already in Eva, and she's saying goodbye to Marco, and this is her disappearing in her whole sailing incident, that we've heard set up in the past books. And then it kind of flashes forward.
Definitely not a scene I ever thought I'd see in any of the books. They don't do a ton of flashbacks, but this is a scene that they reference a lot. Obviously, it's huge to Marco's past. It determined his arc for the first, 3 Marco books and on. And, for them to flashback and show the scene of her leaving, good bookend to the start of the book.
It's definitely very memorable, yeah. It's and recognizable, I think. All the fans who know Marco's backstory know this, the significance of this event, right?
Oh, shit, she's about to get in her schooner.
She's pulling out the Wind Waker. She's going out. Anyway, you flash forward a little bit to the present, and it's like VISSER 1's being brought in to be on trial in front of, the biggest sort of top-of-the-tier Yeerks called the Council of 13. Ooh. And that's got to be like some kind of Star Trek reference or something, right? Because, big, shady, evil council-like groups are always kind of a sci-fi cliche, aren't they?
It's funny that the Yeerk Empire isn't run by I guess it is. It's still emperorship. It's still a dictatorship. They do have an emperor. They just don't know who it is. So it's cool that they a race that's all about stealth and subversion. Even their leadership is hidden among these 13. I thought that was a nice depiction of their personality and stuff. But I think the biggest thing right here is that you see this book already shows you that it's willing to go a little darker in just how it describes Eva and her Yerk hosts, or her Yerk...
her human host body. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I always forget that detail. Yeah, she is horribly gored. Like, half of her face was, blown away from...
burnt off, yeah.
Yeah, I always forget these little details, but yeah, she's not in good shape to begin with here.
And the thing is, she got hurt like a month ago. She got hurt during the big battle on top of the mountain that Marco pushed her off. That's where most of these wounds came from, other than the torture she's, gone through under VISSER 3. And the worst part of it is even though they could easily heal everything, instant plastic surgery, whatever they do, they just let it all sit and get infected. And
yeah, I forgot that description bad. Too. They definitely ignored her wounds and have let things kind of degenerate. Ugh.
Yeah, they make a pretty big point in mentioning just how ill-treated she's been by VISSER 3. I mean, even dragging out her Kandrona feeding so that she's kind of like just on the edge of starvation there. Enough to be coherent, but not quite, well-fed either, so...
Right, he wants her to die, That'd be just the best thing for him. And that's kind of one of the subplots in this book, is just him trying at every point to foil her.
Yeah, it's sort of like a chess game between the two, really. I mean, they're both playing their own hands and trying to get in front of each other.
The problem with that is VISSER 3 is the type to just flip over the board.
Yeah, well, it's very much like Light and L from Death Note, the anime or manga, where, you're rooting for one of them to win, and it'd be best if they just both died, I guess.
Well, it's pretty evident that one has got the advantage, and that's VISSER 3. He's free. He's technically not the one that's on trial, and he has the ability to still be in communication with those around him. And VISSER 1's clearly been cut from whatever ties she had. So yeah, he's got a little bit of an upper hand, but from a wit standpoint, I think we can all agree that VISSER 1 obviously has the advantage there.
Well, yeah, that's true, and she's at least got a little itty bitty tiny support from her host body.
Which fluctuates throughout the endeavor.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
She does get a little bit of support, and it's a little bit later in the book, but it's not like everybody's against her. It's just really, VISSER 3 is definitely has a little more resources to pull from.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I guess she has her own personal army. She has obviously, just you assume anyone who's gotten that high up, they have sub-VISSERs who are loyal to them and stuff like that. It doesn't really go into anyone trying anything outside of her own conniving and scheming plans. You'd think she'd have more support from somebody.
Well, it really goes to show, how the Yerk Empire is structured and how it works is basically built on backstabbers. Really. It doesn't seem like they have that ingrained loyalty.
Well, yeah, but I'm not saying loyalty for the sake of loyalty. I'm saying, anyone in this big political game has something to gain by helping out, the most powerful Yerk alive, VISSER 1. So I'm sure she has subordinates who would try something or try to underhandedly do something. You don't see any of that. I think there could have been at least like one subplot throughout this where the Animorphs were one distraction, and then maybe she has one card up her sleeve with some subordinate on some backwater transmission station, or something.
I don't know, because the beginning of this book starts out obviously with her going on trial and then explaining her backstory, where she started, and back when she's just this like sub-VISSER 409 chilling on this Yerk base on an alien planet somewhere called Olgan. She seems even kind of like a I mean, just more like VISSER 3 almost, the way she disposes of one of her units, just to kind of show who's in charge. And they really often rely on fear and intimidation, and it's often at the cost of their own people.
That's true, yes.
Yeah, I mean, she just straight out murders a Ged just to essentially prove a point of management. And I did find it kind of amusing that she was mentioning how her frustration was with the recent implementation of a rule that said you can't kill your subordinates. That wasn't just kind of like a thing, and that I guess there was enough of them getting killed off that they decided that, yeah, we're probably going to make that an offense.
we actually do need to specify that you shouldn't kill your fellow coworkers.
You know what? New York Empire, that's just hazing. It's not a big deal.
Well, and what's even more interesting is she also mentions that VISSER 3 is there as well as one of her subordinates. So it's almost not a stretch to think that maybe he, as a young, cadet, was inspired by VISSER, the future VISSER 1's kind of tactics here and show of violence.
Hold on. Where does it say that VISSER 3 was one of her subordinates there?
No, he's right. It says it in there somewhere, because I remember reading that and going, huh? I think VISSER, let's see.
It's definitely in here.
Well, from what from my recent reread, I reread it about a week ago. They specifically mention him, VISSER 3, sending the pictures of the humans from the Taxon homeworld, because obviously he was there. So how could he also be on the station?
I think, because I remember when I read it too, I had to reread it, and I was like, it says would eventually be VISSER 3, and I'm trying to find it, but...
Yeah, I'm flipping through the pages
I think
too.
That's
I didn't think it was important enough.
The pictures. I think that's who sent them the pictures.
Oh no! You know what? I don't know. I can't find it.
Here, you guys keep talking. I'm gonna look into this just a little bit.
So I'm glad I wasn't the only one who saw that and went, huh?
Yeah, exactly. She kind of offhanded mentions that, oh, by the way, this subordinate here would be VISSER 3. But, that's what they're up to in the days before they discovered humans, essentially.
I do see where I think we're the ones that are confused. So if you go to page 14, this Yerk named Method runs into the room and tells VISSER, well, who will eventually be VISSER 1, hey, yeah, we just got this report of a class 5 species. And then it goes to the next chapter and it says, that report came from the Yerk who would later rise to the rank of VISSER 3. So the report was VISSER
in the
3.
Andalite Chronicles, we see VISSER 3.
Oh, it doesn't mean the guy Method that came in to report was VISSER 3. It meant that he got it from VISSER. Yeah. There you go. Okay, yeah, that was very, very confusingly worded. Wow, I'm glad I'm not the only one that got confused by that.
We need to move on. We need to move on. I can take your all's apologies at the end of the show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Coleman.
Sure.
We're getting there. But anyway, I like that they explain, that they have a class system of host bodies, with obviously class 5, the top being the most suitable, whereas like Andalites are class 4 because they're powerful, but they're too big of a risk to go after. Yeah. And so it's cool. I don't think we've ever heard that explanation of how they choose host bodies before.
No, I actually told this to my wife, who every once in a while will listen to crazy sci-fi concepts from her husband. And she thought it was really interesting how they broke it down. I think there's probably some room. It could have been like a larger scale because it's so specific to just the aliens that we've met so far on our journey through these books.
Oh yeah, good point.
It doesn't leave really much room open to random other species, but still, it's an interesting concept.
Well, yeah, and as soon as she learns that they found this planet with nice host bodies that number in the billions, she kind of becomes obsessed with these people. And I thought it was cool. It's a nice callback to the Andalite Chronicles that they were studying the videos of Lauren and Chapman to learn about humans. You hear those names pop up. It brings back good memories.
It's great to have tie-ins like that.
Yeah, I mean, they wrap it all into with even Alfangor and Alaran as well. The report ends up becoming a bit of evidence against VISSER 3.
Yeah, it's interesting how they're like jumping back and forth on this timeline of things are happening in the present during the trial, and of course, VISSER 1 keeps throwing it back to the backstory. So there's a bit of back and forth here. But like you mentioned, the courtroom drama does heat up though when VISSER 1 and VISSER 3, who just can't be in a room together without getting into a feud of some sort, start accusing each other of being traitors, and that's kind of how VISSER 3 ends up a little bit in the hot seat as well. VISSER 1 doesn't want to go down without a fight.
Well, I mean, she has pretty good evidence, because the report did get sent in by VISSER 3, but as we know from the Andalite Chronicles, I mean, VISSER 3 had a huge sort of impact on everything that happened there and what came out of it.
Yeah, I don't know why.
How can he be trusted about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? But for whatever reason, VISSER 1 decides that she's going to be the one to check out the Earth. And in fact, she even ignores her own orders to be placed on the Taxon homeworld. And she steals a ship like a Time Lord of some sort. Steals a ship and heads off to Earth to live amongst the humans and maybe participate in wacky sci-fi adventures.
And I think this original leaving for Earth with a subordinate who was loyal to her and kind of dumb, 100% right now, just we're tracking VISSER 1's emotional state. Right now, she is full on Yeerk. Hail to the Yeerk Empire. Here's a new species that I'm going to get credit for.
Yeah. I mean, she essentially takes off in this ship with the guy's name is SM-293, and they're both in these Hark-Bajir bodies, or hosts anyway. And yeah, I mean, she made the searching of the Class 5 species her own personal project, despite everybody's sort of ridicule. And when she was planning on when they were going to take her off of it so she couldn't research it anymore, she just left for the greater
Exactly.
good,
that was like her plan to get ahead of everybody else all along. Like, she's all about finding that Class 5 species and becoming VISSER 1. So it's quite something that we see her in these humble beginnings and know that she actually succeeds. But yeah,
Spoilers.
Like what? You've been keeping up with the story so far. Yeah, so we've got Edris and Essam hanging out on Earth. As it turns out, one of the first places first of all, it's really kind of cool and realistic how they just sort of hover out in orbit and like listen to radio signals and stuff, and just are utterly baffled by the sheer amount of like signals that humans put out, and they're trying to decipher what everything means and all the different languages. I just found that really interesting. Seeing an alien's take on that.
I do disagree with a couple aspects of this. It's incredibly interesting. I agree that they are baffled by the amount of data we're putting out. But one issue I do have with some sci-fi is when they show Earth as this planet where, like, oh my gosh, look at the range of species you have here. Look at the range of habitats. You have both snow and deserts. That more goes back to the old school sci-fi of like Star Wars, of like Hoth is a snowy planet and Tatooine is a desert planet, and it's like most planets are going to have the kind of variety ours do. Especially if they had life, they would probably have an incredible variety of life, because that's just how life works.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we've got a lot of biodiversity, sure, but I think they would notice the humans' capacity for technology.
Yeah, but specifically in this instance, they go into there's a huge confusion with the idea of entertainment and fictionalized stuff, even music. There's kind of the fictional narrative commercials and TV shows. I kind of understand confusion with that. That actually might not exist in any other species they're aware of, but they don't know what music is. And that I have a problem with, because we know the Andalites have culture and arts and things like that. I refuse to believe that we're the first species they run into with music. Because that even goes against the Limnus Chronicles and the things they bring up in that.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too much of, I don't know if it's K, but just trying to make humanity like the super unique species within the universe. Because, there's even in the previous book, Axe is like, I'm not very fond of Earth's music. So clearly he knows what music is. So therefore the Yeerks probably have some idea, or at least heard it through their travels through space. So there's a little bit of an issue there.
Yeah, but think about what they're being compared to, though. The Geds didn't have much going for them. The Texans didn't really have a whole lot of artistic ability. And the Hork-Bajir are simple as hell as well. And Skritna, don't even talk about that. Get out of here with the Skritna. Get that shit out of here.
I can see a bunch of
humans are quite impressive as compared to the spectrum that we've seen so far.
I wonder if this is before or after they make contact with the Lyrans, though.
Oh, yeah, you know what? They really kind of forget about the Lyrans, I feel like, or at least the mentioning of Lyrans throughout the series.
Well, my thing is, they keep bringing up, and they do at the end of this book, too. Every once in a while, they'll bring up a random race that the Yeerks are fighting on some other edge, and it's hard to tell where the Yeerks are in on this fight. There's multiple other planets that we've never even heard of that they're trying to invade and take over different ways, and they just kind of pop up randomly. So that's another issue I have. That's just like, we're gonna throw in another race, and that's what you're gonna do at the end of this book. It's weird when they do that too. Just random thought.
It's not what you expect, I guess. But I think it's more realistic, I guess, that this alien scourge was battling other races or whatever before they found the humans.
But it's hard to know if those kind of little details, they don't seem important, but they're actually important to knowing how powerful the Yeerks are, because they even say at some point in this book that if the Andalites showed up with like 37 dome ships to Earth, like right now, they could do nothing about it. Earth would be lost to the Yeerks. So how many fronts are they fighting? How many resources do they have? How many ships do they have? We don't really ever get the scope of the Yeerks.
No, and by all accounts, it seems like the Yeerks should be drastically outnumbered and unprepared. But they apparently are not. They're a big enough threat that it's stretching the Andalite forces so thin. I don't know. We need to find out more about this, and I suspect we will in the final 10 books or so.
Sort of.
Ish.
Not to spoil the ending of the series, but it does kind of make Earth seem like all their eggs are in that basket, sort of. But in reality, when you read through the series, such as this book, not so much. If the Earths are defeated on Earth, is that really the end of the Yeerk scourge?
Well, I guess you could think of Earth less as another front, and think of Earth more as a resource. Like, Oh
yeah, it's all about the host bodies, and they have the numbers. And if they took Earth, they'd spread significantly faster than they could have without it.
Yeah, if you think about an actual war, if you think about the Civil War or something like that, a town in Virginia creates so much wheat a year, and it might not affect the war overall if they lose that town, but if it affects their resources, maybe they were banking on the hosts of Earth and were spreading themselves thin because they thought they had 5 billion hosts about to be delivered to the front lines, and that losing that at the end of the series just cripples them.
Totes my goats, man.
Makes sense to me.
Right on. Well, the one of the first places they actually go and touch down when they find Earth and come to Earth is somewhere in the Middle East, and it just happens to be in the middle of a big battle going on. So they land on Earth and get out, and they're checking things out, and then there's tanks
specifically
firing,
the Gulf War. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, is that what it is specifically?
Yeah, it's the Gulf War.
I just assumed it was random battle happening.
No,
in the
that's
Middle
what
East.
dates this. This dates it into the 80s, early 90s. they even talk about Bush being president. So this is right in the middle of the Gulf War.
Yeah, it almost sounds like the VISSER one and them drop down in the Battle of Medina Ridge. If you guys,
whoa. I thought I was bringing details to this.
Yeah, well, exactly.
There's been very few cases in recent history where, the U.S. Armed Forces have engaged in, large armored battles, which, in part, that's what this is. They have a pretty good chapter where, VISSER 1 is just eyeing up this battlefield and just watching as these tanks move around and engage each other. And, she makes very clear note that these tanks are kind of moving slow and cautiously because they clearly don't have the ability to see night vision or have night vision, and these other tanks, though fewer in number, are moving boldly and with confidence. And it just kind of there was a few battles in that war that could have been, because there were only a few times where armor met in those types of numbers.
That's awesome.
It's
here first, folks.
It's very possible that Michael Grant might have had that specific battle in mind too, because I know he's a big war and history buff as well. So it's a very good chance that, like you said, he took inspiration from that, or this is that scene. But what this really tells VISSER 1 is that humans are so unstable that they're creating war against each other, that, just that alone makes it seem like they're ripe for the picking, so to speak, for taking over.
And again, just to put in 2 cents, again, we're seeing confusion from the Yeerks on a race fighting itself, like having a intergalactic civil war, where the race, human fighting humans. We know that at least at some point in time, Andalites and some other races that have been brought up in the series had wars with each other. They fought each other. So, again, weird that's so confusing to them.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, their whole lives, it's been, Yeerks together against Andalites. And to see human versus human, it's probably very chaotic. And they actually managed to take one of the soldiers, one of the I don't know what nationality, I guess, but they take one of these soldiers and make him a host real quick, and she doesn't learn not a lot from him, other than the fact that America is probably the place to head. That's where the winners of that battle just came from. So.
Yeah, and what I particularly liked about that chapter was that VISSER 1 made it very clear. She was the first human controller ever, and she had to figure out how that actually works, because, if you're a creature that has to be able to get to the brain, she had to push aside the bones of the ear canal, and as she wrapped herself, she was like, why are there 2 halves of this brain? This doesn't make sense. And
that was the coolest description, I think.
Being enthralled sort of by just the biology of humanity, and describing these brains could, they're 2 halves connected by this thing, and they each have their own way of perceiving the world. It was kind of a very interesting way to describe humanity from a outside perspective.
If they could write the morphine scenes like they wrote this Yeerk entering the brain for the first time scene, people might not skip over them by accident.
Maybe. Yeah, you do tend to skim some of the morph descriptions, for sure. But after they learn from this human that they need to go to America, they they let him go, but they shoot him down with their Draken beams. They're very merciless. And then we return back to the trial, where they actually, I was surprised to learn, were kind enough to give them a little break in the trial so that VISSER 1 can actually eat. And it's kind of funny what VISSER 3 brings her to eat as well.
Yeah, it's you can't know if it's ignorance or if it's, more the torture process or...
Oh, it's totally him trying to just dick with her. A head of cabbage, some eggs, raw eggs, and then I think just a little bit of water or something.
Yeah, exactly. But
And it's worth pointing out that at this point, she's telling her story via what they call memory dump. So they're like actually looking into her memories, so there's no way for her to lie about what happens. Because there's a lot of stuff that she wants to keep secret, obviously, from everybody from VISSER 3, and it comes to light here throughout the book. But, you know, they return to this memory dump, and we've got Edris and Essam going to
Real
America.
Quick, I think it's worth pointing out, too, that these memory dumps, they were done voluntarily by VISSER 1. So what they see and how they see it can be controlled by her to an extent when she does the dump.
Yes, for
right
these
now
ones.
Right now they're looking at public records. Yeah, later they do a live one. But
exactly.
For right now, these can be manipulated or at least edited in a certain way.
Yeah, 100%. And they decide the place in America to go is Hollywood because it seems to be the most important. Ha ha ha. And they just, you know, they sat down in a place. I think they liked it because it had a pool where they come out and quite conveniently, a man and woman come out and happen to be confused about their Hork-Bajir bodies. They think they are, of course, like actors in costume. A real convenient excuse that they've always got to go to whenever aliens and humans are together.
Well, luckily they're in Hollywood. They happen to be at a producer's pool who happened to be working on a sci-fi movie that had, you know, special effects artists who might be coming to the house at some point.
So you're saying there's a lot of convenient coincidences.
A few things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest reasons they went down to the planet was because they were running out of supplies. I mean, they were sitting up in orbit, you know, trying to learn what they could, and Essam was literally beginning to die. I think he said that, like, my host body isn't going to survive for more than a few more hours if we don't get water. And they're like, all right, cool, let's go down to this Hollywood and get some new hosts.
Maybe they went to the pool because he was thirsty, and they're just like, oh well, there's a giant thing of open water.
Well, they absolutely did, because, you know, Idris, or VISSER 1, was like, there you go, Essam, there's your water. And he sticks his head in the pool, and is like, all the chlorine starts burning him up inside, and he starts freaking out. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a bit convenient. If you needed water, I would think that there would have been plenty of other areas to go.
Like 75% of the Earth.
Well, that'd be salt water, and that'd be no good. Well,
because they're obviously checking this water before they drink from it.
So their very first host bodies happen to be this woman named Jenny. They call her Jenny Lines, and we'll get into that. And her, like you said, producer, not necessarily boyfriend, but they do mention that he desires her because he finds her attractive.
Yeah, immediately. I mean, we got into the fact that when they took a host, their first human host, it was a someone of Middle East, you know, the losing side of the Gulf War. And it was an interesting perspective, seeing the Americans from that and everything. And then the second humans we see in the story are this, like, scumbag producer and his coked up, quote-unquote, actress entourage.
Yeah, 100%. Who knows that, like, Jenny doesn't appear to be a star of any noticeable talent or anything. It almost seems like the producer guy just had her there for the night, if you catch my meaning. It would have been really interesting if they wanted to adult this up a little bit more, to include a line from Essam when he takes over Lowenstein, the guy, about, oh yeah, no, he was totally gonna bang you and dispose of you tomorrow or something.
Yeah, I really like that, you know, in this book that's meant for a younger audience, that they do put in. I mean, even if it's kind of subtle, you know, there is evidence, you know, that Jenny is an addict, and that she's hanging out with this producer guy because he gives her, you know, what she got her name for, lines.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I mean, they do mention that she, once Edris does infest her and makes her a controller, and you get a little bit of dialogue as she's like chatting back and forth with Jenny. But yeah, she says she's an actress, but she really hasn't acted, and she's just kind of like,
there you go,
arm candy for this producer guy, and he hooks her up with drugs, and that's their relationship.
She's a good time girl. Exactly.
I have enough friends in LA to know that this isn't even, outside of the reality there. This is not that crazy of a situation.
No,
other than the aliens.
Especially not in the 80s.
Yeah, it's a nice touch of it's a little bit of realism that's, like I said, a little more darker than you would expect to see for a book meant for kids, but it's done in such a way that you get it, but it's not spelled out right.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Well, I believe the term they use is they say she's addicted to chemical substances or something of that nature, where they don't outright say it's cocaine.
Yeah.
She's on cocaine, kids.
Get her.
Her name's just Jenny Lines.
Well, that's just a clever reference for us adults.
Yeah.
But after, they take these human bodies, and these are the ones that they're going to make stick for a while because they've at least got some wealth and credit to their names, and, they're people that they could really use of substance. But then it cuts back to the trial where, VISSER 3 is just hardballing left and right, trying to accuse VISSER 1 of all these traitorous activities. And this is, kind of a little action break beat here where a bunch of animals enter the courtroom and, start mucking everything up as wild animals are wont to do, such as a tiger and a bear and, all the standard battle morphs we've come to know and love.
Yeah, it's two what they think are morphed Hawk-Bajir, a tiger, and a bear, right? So they just bust into the room and start attacking things.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that that this didn't end in more catastrophe. Because I want to see the book or the chapter that they left out where 5 Hawk-Bajir are waiting outside the small little warehouse in the Yerk Pool with like a chained up bear and tiger, and they're like, okay, so what signal do we pop open the door and just let these things go?
Yeah, right. No, dude, I think you and Jimmy were supposed to run in first, waving your Dracon beams around.
Where's Jimmy? He had the elephant.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of giving away the surprise a little bit because, when this first happens, the thoughts even from VISSER 1 is that these are the Andalite bandits, right? She knows at least Marco is one of them, but the Andalite bandits are attacking, and why not?
Sure, she sees the gorilla. And, the VISSER 3 did a good job at making it kind of seem like that for a bit, but even the writers give it away that these are just regular animals because they all die, and VISSER 3 gets to look like the big shot, hero here for a second. He looks all good before the council. Who's just there in hologram, it's worth pointing out. Well, they're actually on the Yerk homeworld.
Yeah, there's a little bit of setup that I think we need to make, which is on top of the trial, there's a battle that's happening kind of at the same time about how the invasion of Earth should proceed, right? So VISSER 3 wants to go into all-out war. He's like, we will crush the humans. Yeah, we'll kill a couple million of them or whatever, but they'll submit. They'll surrender, and we'll have all these hosts, and it'll be quick and easy. And VISSER 1, who was the one, who started the subtle invasion, is like, no, we can't do that. Now, there's reasons for that we'll get to later in the book, but there's this kind of underlying battle that's taking place, and this trial is going to sort of determine, do we go into all-out war and just invade humans and take what we can, or do we continue this kind of subversion? And
yeah, it's always seemed a little fishy. Like, why does VISSER 1 want to, do the sneaky route and, take as few human lives as possible, when in the end that's really not going to matter? It's always been like a lingering question, kind of. And this book does go into, I think, and give her a reason as to why she doesn't want just total outright catastrophe and attacking and death and destruction. And yeah, you find out the reason for it right here, actually. Do you want to talk about it, Coleman?
No, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, this is a ruse. These animals bursting into the room. What they're trying to push off as morphed Hawk-Bajir. This is basically the one excuse that VISSER 3 has had for the Council as to why he hasn't been as successful on Earth. Is the Andalite bandits, or in this case, they're calling them like elite Andalite guerrillas that landed on the planet and have just like messed up every plan that he's made. And with this show,
I want to read that book.
Yeah, with this showing of, we're in this great courtroom drama, and the Andalites bust in, and they're going to kill both VISSERs, and it's this great target, and VISSER 3 just cuts them down, and he's like, okay, problem solved. Now we can get some work done. Now, in my opinion, this is kind of stupid on VISSER 3's part because, I mean, how are the Council of 13 not going to know the Andalite bandits still exist? I mean, what's going to be VISSER 3's excuse in the future when the Andalite bandits attack and his plan inevitably gets shut down? And
he just got rid of his only excuse for failing constantly.
To play Yerk advocate on this, you could say that VISSER 3 doesn't have a long arcane plan right here. He's high enough that he can take some blowback from these falsehoods or whatever, but his goal right now is in the next hour, how can I make sure VISSER 1 is dead? And to that short-end goal, a little attack like this, I mean, even VISSER 1 admits that, it kind of put her at a loss, at least in the short term.
Yeah, and it by following it up with this other revelation, it's really kind of driving a nail in VISSER 1's coffin. So VISSER 3 brings in the surprise witness, this old human host body who's kind of gone crazy now, called Spacey. And he kind of drops a bombshell that they had some babies together, him and VISSER 1.
Yeah, it's without hearing the story, without doing further into the memory dumps and everything like that, it's got to be a pretty huge blow to any Yerk to be doing any kind of experimental procreation with a species they're infesting. I mean, they're pretty by the book, and they do some weird things as far as like killing hosts and torturing them just to make sure the Yerk learns a lesson. But it's got to be the one thing that can raise eyebrows in the Yerk community. Like, wait, you guys did what?
Yeah, exactly, because they view other species procreation as just pointless. It doesn't further the Yerk's goal in any way, and it's a very complicated and unnecessary process to involve themselves in when they're conquering a species.
We're better than that.
Yeah, pretty much. So
it does kind of make you wonder what the long-term plans of the Yerks would be, even if they were to get the humans. Eventually, obviously, the hosts will get older and die. So, there will be volunteering human hosts at one point that all they do is just breed, quote unquote, and they'll be living the good slave life.
But the thing is, you got to think in a Yerk-controlled world. It's like a big bureaucracy. They're okay with having like breeding centers where they can control the process. It's efficient. It's these rogue activities that are a problem, especially from one of the highest in command. Before, there were other witnesses or anyone else to make sure things are going kosher. Or, it's just very icky, even to the Yerks.
Totes. But immediately you're thinking that she had these babies in this Jenny body, but she goes on to tell her story and reveal how she jumped from Jenny to this Allison, who was much better off as a host body because she's more intelligent, had a better career going for herself, and Essam went from this Lowenstein guy to this Spacey, this man named Hildy, who they had the babies with. So now that they're like human tester bodies are out of the way. These are kind of the character bodies that they'll be stuck with for a little while, for the bulk of the book anyway. And this is the one that she has the babies in, obviously, and she talks about how this Allison is so smart and capable that she even managed to retain a little bit of control of her body, as we've heard vaguely hinted at in some other books of some host bodies being able to do. And she uses it ever so slyly, like to close an eye while she's driving to try to kill herself. It's very cool.
I like that Edris is aware of this, and she might not be aware of exactly how or when it's going to be used, but the fact that she's just like, I'm going to let her... This little game they're playing, it's like, I'm going to see if she can take control of this or, whatnot, and then, oh shit, she did something with it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat because the Yeerks up to that point haven't really been able to infest a species that had really any intelligence. I mean, the Ged, the Hork-Bajir, and the Taxons, they don't really have the self-awareness for the most part to be able to contemplate and plan and enact
and fight back and like wrest control of their body back from them. Yeah, I think humans are the only species to ever do that. That they mentioned.
So I mean, she saw it almost as a game, like, oh man, here's this almost equal. Because let's be honest, the Yeerks, for all their technology, and most of that came from the Andalites. So I imagine they have to be, they're further technologically advanced. But as far as intelligence goes, I don't know if they're that much different. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell because obviously
I think what this boils down to is that we think this is a story of the Yeerks invading Earth when really this is the origins of Yeerks accidentally invading a level 4 species, not a level 5. This is the Andalites before they had spaceships,
Wow, this whole book and story is a love story to humanity, really, because this is all about how VISSER 1 learns to fall in love with humans and learns about what they are. And she even goes on to say about how she admires humans' ability to fight and survive against these kind of impossible odds. She's always very moved by how even when humans are in a losing position, they know they can't win, they're still going to fight back and they're still going to try. Whereas we've seen in the past before, if Yeerks, know they're in a bad situation, they fold. They don't have that like survival instinct. And that might even be what sets VISSER 1 apart.
Yeah. I don't know if it directly pertains to her, but it's an interesting thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, because Essam, the whole time we've been talking a lot about VISSER 1, but she's been there with Essam 293, which was that subordinate that she brought along, and she specifically chose him because he wasn't a hardcore Yeerk. He was a sub-VISSER at one time and was demoted because he wasn't able to be brutal enough and seemed to have some empathy towards the people that were around him. And he certainly...
Go ahead.
He's certainly, falling for humanity just as much as it seems VISSER 1 is, if not more.
Yeah, I really dug the parallels between these two characters because you've got, Essam or Hildy, who is very clearly going along with and falling in love with the humans. He mentions that, he talks to his host body and they actually they're on a more friendshipy kind of level, so to speak. And he's all about, making the babies, and he wants to give up his Yeerk identity to take care of the babies later on. And I think if he had continued to live, this would have been the Yeerk that started the whole peace movement. That's what it really reminds me of, is the Yeerks that, like the ones we see that want to go in the peace movement, there are Yeerks that aren't interested in taking their invasion any further. They just fall in love with the humanity and what they get out of it. So it's really interesting that they play off each other for a while, and then she eventually comes around to feeling the way he does and loving the humans. But she's torn to her Yeerk loyalties. Where are we at in the story? What's happening now?
She's still very ambitious. Like she I think slowly gains a respect for humanity, and primarily this Allison person that she's been, controlling for however long. And but she's still very ambitious. Her thoughts do continue to go back to, well, I'm going to be made a VISSER once I turn over this class 5 species.
Yeah, but the revelation that she kind of breeded and gave birth to humans has really ruined her credibility here in face of the council. So this is where they hook her up to the live memory dump, because they're like, we're not sure if we can trust you anymore. And she goes on to reveal, like, shit, well, I got to tell them the real story here now. So she had fully admits to, in coming to enjoy her time talking with Allison, and they debate all these different topics, and Essem's off kind of doing his thing as Hildy. He mentions how he enjoys his human job, and they sort of jump around through their memories of just the next couple of years, and even go into like VISSER 1's emotions, like missing Essem while he's away. That's a very human emotion. A Yeerk had probably never missed another Yeerk before, so just being hit with things like that in a human body must be really, really hard, especially when you're cut off from the rest of your species. She's completely cut off from the Yeerk Empire, besides the kind of occasional messages she gets to send them on her ship, and they still haven't made contact yet. They still haven't made contact with the Yeerk Empire.
Definitely time for another VISSER 1 emotional check. I think at this point she
right.
She is, and I keep calling it. That's the crazy thing about this Yeerk. I can't stop calling her. Even though
exactly. They're basically genderless.
Even though only 2 of her hosts have been women. It's still like I always have seen VISSER 1 throughout the entire series as a woman because of that.
Well, she initially preferred the woman body over Lowenstein's fat old man.
Who doesn't? But still, the point is her emotional state at this point is not just confusion but fear. Like, we've been out here so long, we're so cut off from the Yeerk Empire. It's crazy to see how gung-ho she was at the beginning of this memory dump, even not too long after everything. She is just ready to call it quits and live out her life on Earth. That's how powerful the humanity's pull is on her at this point.
So there's one thing that I think we should mention about this live memory dump, which is this memory is not displayed to the Council of 13 in its entirety. Nobody can see this except for one person, who is Garoff. Right?
I thought that was just the entire council is watching these. It's the live memory dump that only he's a part of.
Yeah, and that's I thought we were talking about the live dump.
Are we already in the live dump?
Yeah. This is I said because they don't trust her after the baby thing. They're like, we better check this shit out live. We're tuning in.
There you go. Trying to fact check us so much, I lost that we were already in the live one.
Yeah.
So the live dump happened because the previous memory dumps that were viewable by all of the council and VISSER 3 and all that had been done voluntarily via VISSER 1 after she had come back from her initial encounter with the humans and her time spent there. But apparently people of VISSER rank aren't required to do dumps regularly. And this is the live dump is sort of we're going to get the real story straight from your brain, but it's only connected to one member of the Council of 13, who is Garoff. And Garoff is essentially the spokesperson between the Council of 13 and the trial itself. And from what we've seen in the book so far, Garoff seems to have VISSER 1's back a little bit, for whatever reason. I think she had mentioned a mentor.
He was her mentor, yeah.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So
I didn't want to get hard on her as it could be. I wanted to mention that the live feed wasn't being seen by everybody, because it's very damning. I mean, part of the we didn't mention any of the charges that were leveled against VISSER 1, but a big.
Oh yeah. Her charge list is good. Yeah, and it's mostly death or death by starvation of Kandrona.
Yeah, it's death by Dracon, death by starvation, or death by torture. It's all fun stuff.
Here's the big question: Is the book implying that Garoff is the flat-out emperor?
It's She does mention that he could be.
He's certainly the one that talks the most.
Yeah, I mean, even like out of I think it said there were 9 Hark-Bajir, including Garoth, who's all battle-scarred and stuff. There's 2 Taxons, and there's 2 mystery ones that are kind of hidden in shadows. And nobody
calling it right now. One of them is Krayak.
No. The other one's
and the other one's Elemis. Yeah, there it is. We got the hint right here.
An amazing. That'd be an amazing turning point. But.
No, but I mean, it would make sense if he was, just because the mentor of VISSER 1 is probably a pretty powerful person, has been around the block a few times. But at the same time, if they're doing these broadcasts all the time or these trials or whatever, you'd have to think that it would be very easy to just have kind of a spokesperson on the council, and then you don't know who the real emperor is, if it's just someone who speaks well or just they.
Oh, sure, that could be it. Even though he was in a Hark-Bajir body, and we routinely hear about how they have a hard time speaking English and they butcher their words. There's none of that in this. He's a very well-spoken Hark-Bajir, I guess. And that's the reason why while they're doing this live dump, Gareth's kind of popping in and watching the memories with her. Like she mentions how in one of them they're driving and he, is sitting shotgun there. And then, they're doing this montagey kind of segment where they're jumping through memories and they keep going forward. And Gareth's becoming very alarmed at what seems like, VISSER 1 falling in love with this human life. And suddenly she's pregnant now with twins. And they keep jumping ahead. And after that, they're running low on Kendrona. And that's what kind of starts this whole, falling out between Essam and Edris. Because, Essam really wants to stay and take care of the twins. That's what he's all about now. But shit's not going to be that easy.
I do think it's interesting that Garuth, whether he's emperor or not, he is understanding of, all of the things that it takes to get into the higher levels of the Yeerk Empire. All the rules you break, all the laws you break, at the end of the day, it's more about your successes that matter than all your failures.
Yeah, than your transgressions.
Yeah, because it seems like to get into the higher ups of the Yeerks, there's a lot of dead bodies on the trail behind them. So
yeah, the rules of the Yeerk Empire are more like guidelines. It's we don't care that much, but certainly if you do some serious stuff, they're going to have to hold you accountable for it.
Lie to the council.
It's just kind of a known that in order to rise to the level of a VISSER or whatever, you're going to have to do some stuff that's against the on the book rules, essentially.
Right, and one of the big no-nos of their rules are it's probably even an unwritten rule. They just know it is don't blend in and become one of your host body. Don't let the host body consume you. You're still Yeerk in there.
It's not even like a general rule. It's more of it's something they're disgusted by. Their whole livelihood is taking control of these hosts, and it'd be like, I don't know, not being good at sports or something. It's something that other people look down on. It's just something that the Yeerks, it's so basic to their core. I wouldn't even call it a law of their society. Just more of why should we promote you if you can't even keep control of yours? If you're in love with your host.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
The thing is that from what I've seen throughout the series is that humanity is the first species that they've had to infest through subtlety. Right? They just kind of charged in and started getting Hark-Bajir. The Ged, who knows how they managed to infest the first Ged. I'm guessing the Ged stuck his head in a Yeerk pool or something.
Yeah, but I say fell into a Yeerk pool.
Fell in, and Yeerk was like, oh, this is cool. Let's go ahead and take over this thing. But humanity is the first group that we've heard of that they've had to get through subversion. So they are living day-to-day lives. They are infecting groups that have pre-existing families and relationships, and it's got to be kind of a new experience, and especially with this rule stuff, that, hey, yeah, we're expecting you're going to be pure Yeerk through and through, but you also have to live the second life as another person for extended periods of time. So, the fact that they have some people that are turncoating on them, and VISSER 1 in this point sort of did, and the Yeerk, what's the Yeerk's name that Cassie was with in 19? I can't remember. It shouldn't be that surprising, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I bet the Yeerk propaganda is just amazing for, don't become a human, or in their case, like some of the earlier stuff would be like, resist the urge to eat your fellow coworker for the Taxon controllers, or something.
Are you having a little too much fun at these human pool parties? Visit a counselor today.
Well, they
you
probably would have to have
therapy.
Yeah, there would probably have to have some kind of like psychologist, a Yeerk psychologist on hand to like talk people out of, wanting to indulge in human activities.
Well, yeah, you gotta have like a Weight Watchers for Yeerks. You gotta have AA meetings, sex addicts, like all the pleasures of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, because albeit the Yeerks are a parasitic species, the thing is that, as we've seen, they're not evil by nature. It's more of a cultural thing. So, you take a whole bunch of them and you start infesting tens of thousands of humans, there's going to be a few that, just because the experience isn't there previously, that are going to probably begin to kind of make it almost a symbiotic situation. Maybe
well, that'll make them as diverse as humanity already is. So we already see that causing divisions amongst us. And just the way that people want to do things, the way people want to run things. Yeerks are no different from that as soon as they absorb humanity. They get the best of us, but they also get the worst of us. Boom! Put that on a cover somewhere.
If you can't handle the worst of humanity, you don't deserve us at our best.
True that. And you know what? At this point,
advice.
Things are not looking so good for VISSER 1 here after this whole bombshell revelation that, they're really falling in love with humanity, and they had these babies that they wanted to care for. And it's at the point where she's almost lost so much credit that they're just like, we need to take a recess right now. This VISSER 1's host body is apparently about to burst from urine and stool samples. We got to get her out of here and get her some actual food. So they just take a little break. And this is where even Eva is like, man, things are not going so well for you, but I see something in you, VISSER 1. Something's there, and I'm going to help you a little bit here. And, during this break, this is a great little break from the trial scene. Gives VISSER 1 some time to refresh her memories and just eat and shit, literally. But she's also able to snatch a cell phone, and this is like the whole key to the plot here of making things work out, is that she sees another controller human with a cell phone that goes off, and she manages to bump into her and swipe it from her. And so thank goodness for that. Otherwise we wouldn't have, the great stuff that goes down here.
Yeah, because, the whole time during all these memory dumps and VISSER 1 telling the story, Eva, Marco's mom, has been in the back seat essentially making comments. And VISSER 1 is seeing that sort of trap is closing on her second by second, and she realizes that, after the false attack of the Andalite bandits, on VISSER 3 and the killing of them, her saving grace at this point is if the Andalite bandits actually do attack.
Yeah.
And basically prove that VISSER 3, you're full of crap and you just lied to the council. How do you plead?
Which, from the beginning of the trial, her plan has been kind of like, can I turn this back on VISSER 3? The way they accuse each other at the beginning, the very dramatic courtroom beginning, where they're yelling at each other and acting like lawyers from TV. They both are trying to pin on the other. Just so far, VISSER 3 has had a much stronger argument.
Well, he's had all the resources and the freedom to arrange things like the fake Andalite Bandit attack. So yeah, everything's really working to his favor. It's that she manages to swipe the cell phone and go to a bathroom stall and put in the call to Marco. The call that we saw, at the very end of the last book, the proposal. This is where that picks up, and it's just really good stuff. I mean, this phone call with Marco is so tense.
They really need to take down that 1-800 Animorphs number. They're really way too easy to get a hold of.
Well, she just calls her home.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because, I mean, she knows that Marco is an Andalite bandit, and she keeps that information to herself. She doesn't inform the council. She doesn't inform VISSER 3 because she's happier to see VISSER 3 fail than...
Yep, she wants him struggling.
Information out there.
But as VISSER 1, here's the thing that doesn't make as much sense. As VISSER 1, and especially after this book, we see how much her roots are really in Earth. How much Earth matters to her personally, professionally, all these things. I don't understand. If she is VISSER 1, why is VISSER 3 able to control Earth at all? Why is he on Earth at all? Why isn't she heading up the fight and continuing to do things her way? She has authority over him. Why?
Well, it's because the council has clearly assigned VISSER 3 the task of Earth right now.
And she just has enough pull to make it happen the way she wants?
Not after the reunion went down.
Well, obviously,
she was obviously in horrible standings there.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, in general, VISSER 1 has always seemed, and this is probably the truth of the writing up to this point, or up to the first point they mentioned the Council of 13, it's always seemed like VISSER 1 is controlling the war effort against the Andalites in general, and VISSER 3 was in control of Earth. But obviously now we're seeing how much the stakes are with her and Earth, and how much Earth means to her. It's weird that she's allowed him so much blundering control.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Well, I want to talk about this Marco phone call because, he's so distant, and it's really a different Marco than we've seen up to this point. Whenever he talked to his mother before, he'd always get choked up. There was a period of time where he couldn't even talk to her in that first book because that'd give away his secret. But now that that's all out and gone, he's got really nothing to lose here, and he makes it very clear that he doesn't care if she dies. He's not really in this to save her or anything like that. Makes it very clear that he's going to kill the Yeerk. He just doesn't seem willing to help her at all until she, clearly spells out how that they can break into the Yeerk pool where she's being held. And so he kind of seems to agree to it, but, there's no real guarantee that him and his buddies are going to show up and save her and bail her out. And she's, just hauled back into the courtroom.
Especially not at the exact right time she needs him to.
Well, she does say, come right now, immediately, and they all live within the town. The Yeerk pool is immediately under them, pretty much anywhere you go in the downtown area. So it's not a far stretch to think that they could get there quick.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's just they've had emissions before they've gone to the Yeerk pool, especially with the new filters, with the drones, all these things that are make it such a dangerous place. They had weeks and some at least days in advance to plot how to get in and stop things, and man, it just looks so easy in this book.
Yeah, the Yeerk pool has always been, from book one, a hard target for them to deal with. It's just dangerous to go in there. I'm not even just getting in there itself, but like being in there is obviously just a death trap. And they basically throw out this sort of plot device. Yeah, there's some Taxon meat being shipped in. That ought to be easy enough. Yeah. I mean,
well, you know what? You make a good point that the Yeerk pool is hard to penetrate and all that. But let's not forget that a weakened Cassie infiltrated and made it out of the Yeerk pool all by herself, and then went on to perform alien brain surgery. So,
Cassie is a boss.
Willing to give them I'm willing to give them a pass on this one because she flat out tells them like where the cargo's coming in, how it's getting down, and they're smart enough and capable enough at this point to take control of a couple Texans.
Yeah, the thing is as much as I'm appreciative of being here with you guys chatting in this podcast,
you hate
this
us.
book is amazing. Well, I mean maybe a little, but this book is a fantastic book, but the one thing that I wish was, there's not much of the main cast in it. And this chapter here that's dedicated to VISSER 1 reaching out to Marco is really a very, very powerful chapter. And I like, Marco's reaction. Yes, he is very distant. He is very cold. And it kind of shows, the character's development. I mean, one of the reasons why Marco decided to stay in the war was because of his mom. And, here he is flat out saying like, yeah, what's it to me? I'll kill you. If I have to kill my mom, I'll do it, whatever. But,
yeah, the difference is now he's just looking for a resolution to the whole situation. It used to be, I'm going to get my mom back. Like that was the possibility. He had the hope for it. Now it's, I need to end this situation, this conflict with VISSER 1, whether it is through her death or not.
And after this conversation that they have, where they discuss, Marco coming with the Animorphs and Axe, to basically make a show of face, there's a little bit at the end of this chapter that I'd like to read if you guys don't mind.
Oh wow, yeah, you're falling right in line with our podcast one.
Well, that's after the Animorphs already come into the trial.
No, not yet. This is still the conversation of Marco.
Okay, yeah, badass. Okay. Badass, read it.
So, VISSER 1 is sitting in a bathroom stall on a stolen cell phone. So you've got one of the highest-ranking members of the Yeerk army or military drop down to this level where they're forced to call one of the Animorphs. And Marco is just like dead on point, where he doesn't make a whole lot of conversation about it, and at the end of it he doesn't even commit to it. He's like, okay, we'll see. And he says it was his only show of emotion. His voice cracked when he said, "Mom." "I know you will. I love you," Eva said, silent, a prisoner inside her own skull. "Marco, your mother loves you," I said. But if I've been expecting him to soften, I got the opposite result. "I know my mother loves me, VISSER," he said. "And let me make one thing clear. There's no deal between us, you and me, Yeerk. I'll kill you for what you've done to her and to my dad. Count on that." And he hung up. The door burst in as I slammed the cell phone into the toilet bowl and flush. Preposterous. A scrawny teenager threatening me. I was a prisoner of VISSER 3, already all but condemned to a death by torture and starvation. Did the child think he could frighten me? It was laughable. "And yet you are not laughing, are you, Yeerk?" says Eva. So Marco just dropped that on her. I mean, you got VISSER 1, one of the most dangerous Yeerks that they've come up against, coming to beg on hands and knees, essentially. And Marco just drops that on her. And even Eva in the back of her skull is just still kind of mocking her. It's just nice to see that, how far the mighty have fallen, basically.
Totally.
And there's still a ways to go.
Oh, you know what else I forgot to mention about the Animorphs penetrating the Yeerk pool this time? They brought Eric. Okay, so that kind of explains everything.
Yeah,
they brought Eric.
Honestly,
they went to Eric.
Eric, just like Axe, Eric should be an Animorph at this point. I mean, he just should be.
Yeah, basically. But like you said, this is where she has to discard her cell phone and just kind of hope that Marco's coming to back her up, even though it also means that she's still going to die. So her only hope is also her biggest threat, really. And they take her back into the courtroom and throw her back on, and she's got to go right back into her story about how this is kind of the mid to closing section of the book here, where they're kind of winding things down, and because of their Kandrona starvation, that they're running low on Kandrona. They're forced to contact the Uric Empire at this point, and Visser 1 goes ahead and does it without really consulting her companion about it. And, she informs him about the Class 5 species to kind of get off the hook. And she goes back to tell Essam about all this, and it causes an actual argument. And this is sort of where you have the split between these two starting to forge more strongly. Because Essam really wants to stay with the humans and just, get some new Kandrona and, lie to their superiors some more and stay on Earth. But, Essam is able to talk him out of it, so to speak, and they agree to kind of leave Hollywood to go to a little bit smaller of a place, and that's why we get a lot of these theories that the town that they're in is somewhere in Northern California, I think. Is that about right? It's not L.A. per se.
It could be northern, it could be mid, it could be, near Modesto or... just any kind of beach town. Most people say parts of them are not off just San Diego, but not as big of a city. So it's really up in the air, but just a random coastal California town.
Yeah, but this is where we actually get into them starting the sharing. Finally pops up here. Where are my notes?
Yeah, which is great. Are you looking for where you're...
Yeah, I mean, Allison, at this point... Idris had been still in Allison, and they essentially had taken, this rich producer when they were Jenny Lyons and Lowenstein.
Lowenstein.
Before they offed Lowenstein and Jenny off, they transferred a bunch of money from his bank account into a different one, and now that they're in these new hosts, they're pretty well off, and.
Yeah, she mentions how she starts the sharing. She starts the sharing not as Allison, but as this other host body that she picks up, a male with three names because those are in. Just like we saw with the William Roger Tennant thing in the proposal, the previous book. She starts the sharing with one of those three-namey kind of feel-goody sort of people.
Yeah, it's crazy to see and this is I think really relevant to this book taking place in the 90s, is you had some of those George Jones type cults popping up all over the place, and they got such a gathering. And to see talk about this book being dark, nothing it's talking about besides the alien presence, nothing it's talking about isn't something that didn't actually happen in real life and scam and ruin a lot of people's lives to this day.
Yeah, because there's a big debate between Idris and Essam, where Idris is very confident after having, they've been on Earth for quite some time now and had several host bodies, and she's come to the conclusion that you can make humans voluntarily become hosts, and Essam is essentially that'll never happen. They won't do that, and so the sharing is essentially a tool to play on humanity's weakness. And she brings this up multiple times, that humans have a weakness, and what she decides to target is, our desire to belong, to be wanted, to be a part of something. And that's where the sharing, begins, is to just play on that weakness and draw people in who may feel outside of society and give them a place to go. And like Coleman was saying, it's definitely very... it meshes very well in with reality because, those things happen. That's what cults are.
Yeah, totally. Like the Jonestown and all of that crazy stuff that I'm sure more than influenced, this book, if not a lot of the series. So the rift is forming between these two characters. Essam clearly wants to, at this point, he's thinking it'd just be better for him to die and let the humans be. But we've got Idris kind of convincing him otherwise. And
which that's a big deal, seeing the act of self-sacrifice from a Yeerk that wasn't ambitious, a Yeerk that has nothing to gain or could do all these things with, like straight up self-sacrifice from a Yeerk who's dying of Kendrona starvation.
Yeah, he didn't want him to hurt the kids. And then, we get back to the trial, and VISSER 3, in another wacky turn of surprises, brings in another guest witness, and it's, this time, one of the twins, the boy. And, in a really screwed up scene, tosses VISSER 1 a gun and is like, here, murder your child.
And there's a little detail here. I know you're going back to something that was just said, but there's a little detail with the kid and the gun, because you think handing VISSER 1 a gun in general is just a bad idea, but the child with the Yeerk host holds on to the gun and puts it right up to their chest and holds it there so that she can't use it as a weapon against anybody else.
Well, yeah, because this is a very intense scene, because we saw through primarily the live memory dump that the affection that VISSER 1 began to have for humanity, and there was this weird relationship between Edris and Essam and Hildy and Allison, where they were controllers, but they still did this thing and they had children, and Edris and Essam felt sort of like parents, even though they didn't actually
provide anything,
birth the children. Yeah, I mean they were controlling the bodies that did it, but they still had these feelings. And the point is that Garoff was the only one of the council who saw her attachment to these children and to these hosts, and as well as Essam. So when that live memory dump ended and Garoff basically said, okay, well, let's just continue, he didn't describe, she had these affections towards the kids. So nobody else in this trial knows how VISSER 1 really feels about the children. And what happens is essentially VISSER 1 or VISSER 3 walks her into a trap and says, okay, well, what about the children? Did you care for them? And she says, absolutely not. It was just a matter of me understanding humanity. And that pretty much puts her in the position where he goes, oh, okay, well, then kill your kid if you don't care
it's
about
great.
him.
You got Eva in her head yelling, no, this is a trap, right as she's saying it. It's great.
Yeah, Eva, it's nice to see the Eva and Marco. You see where Marco gets his smarts from. I mean, Eva plays very much like a Marco in this book, where she sees the trap before it's sprung, and she does try to help Edris and staying out of them, but unfortunately Edris, trying to defend herself, walks into VISSER 3's trap and now is put in the position where she has to essentially shoot her own child.
Yeah, but luckily, I mean, before, it's really tense for a moment, and you're on the edge of your seat thinking that she's actually going to do it. Very much probably would have here to save her own skin. But luckily, this is when the Animorphs finally do break in and strike, and they're able to, in this confusion and chaos, Marco can scoop up VISSER 1 and get her to temporary safety while everyone's kind of battling around them. And it gives us the nice scene of Marco reunited with his mom and VISSER 1, and just what happens with that. Because I honestly, I wasn't expecting Eva to agree to the terms of, leaving Eva's body for any period of time. She really puts her trust in Marco to not kill her here.
Well, she's pretty desperate, and it's a very enemy of your enemy is my friend kind of scenario. Because every interaction with the Animorphs for her has been, pretty horrible as well, but they've never killed her. And even though Marco tried the last time, she doesn't really have another option here. So...
Yeah, I mean, what happens is essentially Marco tells Axe to put your tail against her throat, cut her head off at the count of 10 if she doesn't comply. And I mean, what's VISSER 1's options? She either complies, and Eva straight up says, no, Marco will kill us. There's not even a question about it. So she either dies or she comes out and hopes that whatever Marco and his mom discuss ends up working out in her favor. And they are hidden by Eric and a hologram right now because they're still in the Yerk pool.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
They don't really mention. It's cool though because it's from VISSER 1's perspective. She doesn't know about Eric, and she just says like, you know, we're in a hologram. How are you doing this? And Marco's kind of offhandedly is like, it's something we put together with parts from Radio Shack. Not willing to give away their secret. So at least she doesn't know about the chi.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I'm interested to see, and I'm sure you know this, Richard. But you know, there's a lot of ghostwritten books that we haven't read, and I'm waiting for the chi to be revealed in some way, or them to be a more part of the Yerk's thought process, or
it doesn't. I don't think it really happens until the last book or 2 or 3, maybe, when they're in all-out war.
Well, the last books. Go ahead.
Well, it depends on how much you want me to give away, but in all honesty, the chi, if I'm remembering correctly, literally never become part of the Yerk's radar. The Yerks never learn about them.
Oh yeah, and you know what? That actually causes a huge rift between Jake and Eric later in the series because he resents them for not being a bigger part of Earth's defenses. And the Chi choose to kind of stay hidden, stay out of the fight. I think I recall that.
Yeah, essentially the rift happens because Jake puts the Chi in a position that they really don't want to be in. And
he uses them, essentially.
He uses them really, really hard, yeah. But as far as the Yerks learning about the Chi, no, I don't think it ever happens. And it was kind of neat in this book where VISSER 1 kind of looked at the hologram technology, and obviously she doesn't see Eric standing around or anything, because she notes, like, well...
A hologram can hide itself, yeah.
Yeah, if it's a hologram of this advanced technology, it can probably hide itself, and they're like, yeah, this is probably even outside of Andalite technology. So she knows something's kind of amiss, but obviously she doesn't know what the actual full detail is.
Let's just be glad that the Pemalites didn't land on the Yerk homeworld and give them their technology instead of the Andalites. That would have been,
I don't think they would have found
a whole other book series.
I don't think they would have found the little gray slugs quite as entertaining or attractive as dogs, though. So... I don't think there's.
Yeah, but their dogs would have been playing in the Yerk pools and messing it all up and picking up Yerks and dragging them across the ground, and it would have been just a messy situation.
I guess so. Well, anyway, with this whole scene, we get Essam, or VISSER 1, kind of leaves Eva's body. She has a nice little chat with Marco that we're not really privy to at this particular page. But she does get to go back inside Eva's body, and she finds out that it's actually Eva who wanted them to put her back in, because she thinks that, you know, she needs to be there to kind of aid VISSER 1 with this situation with VISSER 3 wanting a full invasion, but VISSER 1 at least wants to keep it, you know, subtle and secret. And so she's going to kind of stay where she's at and try and help influence the war that way. So it's a really big decision coming from her, just like an equally big decision from Marco, allowing all this to happen, essentially, and being okay with it.
Not to mention this backfires on her multiple times towards the end of this book.
Yeah, sure. I mean, VISSER 1... one of the biggest reasons she wants to do the slow invasion is so that she can protect the two children, because she had twins, right? She had a boy and a girl, as Allison, and she wants to protect her children. And apparently, she has periodically, you know, checked in on them as time has gone on. And Eva essentially tells Marco, "Hey, look, this is how I fight this battle. This is how I fight the war. Is we don't kill VISSER 1 because she's going to keep things under control." And it's a very intense scene between Marco and his mom, because Marco's holding VISSER 1, and it's kind of neat to think about when you're looking at it through VISSER 1's perspective, and she's going through Eva's memories and like seeing herself as a Yerk in Marco's hand, like, and just his desire to just squash her between his fingers, and he doesn't. So
yeah. It's a big moment for both of them. And, I really like how Eva kind of makes the point that when she's telling Marco about the twins, she says, Visser 1, just like me, is a mother now. She's got that instinct. Whether she likes it or not, she's going to want to protect, what she helped create, her children. She knows that one of them is made the controller, the boy. I think there's really no mention of the daughter where she went off to. I think she's safe temporarily, but who knows? And where are we at?
We're now at the point where they knock her out, and the Animorphs bug out of there, probably literally. And you get this great scene of Eva being unconscious, and the Yeerk herself, Visser 1, just basically has to wait for her body to come back online, and she's kind of continuing the story of the courtroom and what really happened and what she didn't tell the Counselor 13, and this great flashback of her being so excited about a voluntary host and making a bet with Essam about whether that would work with humans or not.
Yeah, exactly. The voluntary controller thing is a big part of her plot for this invasion. She thinks and that's another reason I think why she wants to keep going with the secret, the backdoor invasion-y kind of route, is because she believes that enough humans will voluntarily turn themselves over to their cause once they realize how big, this Yeerk sharing is becoming. So we get a little bit more flashback with that, and her just kind of being really prideful about it to Essam, who is very distraught by this because he's not getting his way. Essentially, he can see Visser 1 kind of sliding back into Yeerk mode with the invasion and all that jazz.
Yeah, he's not having it.
But then she wakes up and they take her back to the courtroom drama once more. So she can kind of recount how she tracked down Essam, who, ran off after their little split tiff, who is now on the verge of starving from Kandrona. Or really, he is starving. She finds him as he's dying, basically, with the children. They have a little fight, a little scraping, and Visser 1 basically kills Essam and Allison out of this whole conflict. It's not a very happy ending.
Yeah, and Eva in her head's like, just moments after sparing her life and all that, she's starting to be like, wait, you did what? I thought you were good now.
It's an about face for sure.
Yeah, because essentially there was a fight that broke out between Essam and Idrid, and what they did was Essam forced Idris or Visser 1 out of Allison. Put her, almost starved her out of the host, but gave her a different host so that she could survive. And Essam ran off with Allison, the human, without a controller, or not without being a controller, with the children, because they love the children. And
I guess I never really put that together. That is a very interesting thing to point out, that the controller was off with Allison as she was free, and they're trying to protect their children.
So there was a weird bond there between the humans and the Yeerk hosts, and once Idris turned against them, they were still wanted to be this strange polygamous family.
Yeah, they talk about how they have their, 4-person relationship, and it's weird, but it seems to work, aside from the one kink in it, which is Visser 1.
Yeah,
but
Eva even brings up that, asks Idris, were you jealous that Essam ran off with Allison, even if you weren't inside of her, controlling her? And
that statement makes a lot more sense now. Yeah, it's harder.
Yeah, it's tough because you essentially have 4 beings, that have in some way, shape, or form birthed 2 children, and they feel, at least to some extent, equally attached. And you have Allison, who is now no longer a controller, willingly working along with Essam as he is controlling Hildy to save the kids, and they're fighting against Idris or Visser 1.
Well, that'd be an interesting book right there.
Yeah, I wonder if there was any further along plan of Allison to actually free Hildy. Or if she was okay with it.
Essam had already pretty much, he had said that I will die instead of giving up humanity. Yeah. So I think what happened was Essam said, you know what, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to stop Idris, and we're gonna, Allison, you and I and Hildy, as I'm controlling him, are gonna save the kids, and eventually I'll die, and it's up to you two to take care of it. And essentially that did happen, with the exception of Visser 1 murdering her former host.
Besides that,
yeah. Like I said, it didn't really go down well for them, because at this point the sharing is actually starting to take off now, and more Yeerks are starting to arrive on Earth. So with Hildy and Essam out of the way, Visser 1's in full-on invasion mode. So this is where she takes full control of Lord David Altman. And she wants to move on and find a new host. And she just... this is my one gripe about the book, I guess, is that she just randomly mentions, like, okay, and now I left him behind and I moved on to Eva. Well, why? Why'd you choose Eva specifically? There's really no reason given. It's just it's like they forgot about this detail almost.
No. Absolutely it's given.
Okay,
that's a big plot point into the book. She specifically says she takes Eva on because she was nostalgic to be part of a family again, a human family, and she wanted to see what she could have had. To her, Eva represented a family with Marco and the dad, with how her kids would have grown up eventually, and they could have been this family with a job and this core unit and no worries in the world. And she wanted to experience that again. And once she actually got it, she realized that it actually mattered. This is actually a huge point to her humanity as a Yeerk, and what she actually cared about with humanity. She realized the core component, it's not just being in that situation. It's caring about the people you're in that situation with. This family, Eva's family, didn't matter to her because it wasn't her kids. It wasn't her husband. And so even though she thought she'd get those feelings back, it didn't work when it wasn't the personal relationship she had before. It didn't matter, but that's a big, huge.
Okay, well, you know what? They didn't spell it out so plainly, I guess, and in such depth as you put it. And I really like that angle on it now. She can't recreate that old magic that she used to have, but it definitely awakens her to the fact, being Eva and seeing the relationship with Marco and all that, and wishing she could have had it, might be what led to her. Having this kind of awakening and taking on these human characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with Mitchell that it wasn't very well put in the book why she chose Eva. I mean,
yeah, you're reading into it a lot, Coleman.
I thought it pretty plainly laid it out.
I felt that she said that she did want the family experience and all that kind of thing. But I would have liked it a little better if they had probably went into more detail as to, okay, how did you get Eva? Where did you meet her? How, what was the details behind your choosing of this host, other than you have a kid and a husband? It seems like that particular person may not have been the best option, or at least the one that made the most sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I was looking just now to see if there was where I thought that it so plainly put it out.
I'm looking at it too, actually.
Everybody, all listeners, please put your books up. Let's look together.
Just like the VISSER 3 misunderstanding we had earlier with the report giver.
Yeah, that was a very weirdly worded passage. Okay.
But Richard, what did you think of? What was your thoughts on just everything, having the Animorphs in this book in general, like having them be a plot point or distraction? Did that work for you?
It did to some extent. I do think that the way they got there was a little awkward. I mean, the fact that VISSER 3 had to be dumb enough to let her go out into the common area of the Yerk pool, and there's a girl with a cell phone that just happens to be there. I mean, this was in the late 90s or early 2000s, I guess, and cell phones probably weren't quite as common.
Right.
There was a little bit of plot that I didn't agree with, but I was glad that they did allow the Animorphs to have a moment. I mean, the series is about them primarily, and the relationship between Marco and his mom, or in this case VISSER 1, them being one and the same essentially. I think you couldn't make this book without touching on it, or at least having a present day interaction of some kind.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? This book is like the Chronicles in that it's a side story, but at the same time, this one is lucky enough to be considered canon. Unlike, kind of some of the Megamorphs, they might allude to them at times. The first one is pretty well inducted into the canon, but I feel like the others they kind of exist a little bit outside of it. But this one definitely goes hand in hand with the series, and including the Animorphs just brings it into the main series even more, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you guys don't mind, I would like to do a dramatic reading.
Please.
This is from page.
Oh, absolutely.
This is from page 186 of VISSER, and it's specifically talking about her host Eva. I had taken this final host because, at least unconsciously, I wanted to know the life I could never really know. The love of a spouse, an equal, the love of a child, but none of it had ever really touched me. I'd had my fling with humanity. I was Yerk once more. I was VISSER 1. Boom.
Okay. Nice.
So it's not. I thought it was longer than that. I thought it was like a whole page talking about it, but I guess that's all we get.
You're right, but that made a strong impression on you. It fully, in your mind, explained all of her ideas and her desires there. So good job. Good on ya.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. A couple of sentences definitely it meshes into the reasoning behind her taking Eva as a host a lot better than just nothing, obviously.
We don't get the specifics on, where she tracked her down or whatever. It would be really interesting, I guess, to know if Eva herself got caught up in the sharing. And that's why she succumbed eventually. I assume not, because she doesn't specify that, but...
It's also nice to know that despite Edris, murdering the host that she had been so attached to, and Allison, her partner Isam being killed or dying of congenital starvation, that she was still wanting that there was something she wanted to go back to. She missed it, and because she wasn't the one that was, she didn't make that relationship with Marco's father, and Marco obviously wasn't her child that she had birthed. She still yearned for it, and it does kind of play back into why she has such a close attachment to her own children, even though she is all about the Yerk mission.
And she's in a different place than she was when she was in love with humanity. She thought that she would get something out of having that relationship back with this new family, and found that she didn't really. But she still cared about her children who were out there, her real children, and so she's this new hybrid kind of personality who's obviously full-on Yerk, but has compassion, or has learned compassion from us.
She's got that motherly instinct now. Something that Yerks, being a combination of, what is it, 2 or 3 Yerks? 3 of them.
Yeah.
Come together in a cloud and spawn one. It's very different to give life to something and then be around to witness that life and want to take care of it and see it grow and succeed in life.
Yeah.
So that's what she's really feeling and absorbed in.
So you want to lead us into the sentencing?
Yeah, okay, so, 100%. With all this information now come to light, Gareth thinks, he's seen enough to sort of confer with his consul and make their decision, and unsurprisingly, I guess, they come to the consensus that the sentencing for both VISSER 1 and VISSER 3, who, by the way, halfway through this trial, himself found himself on trial along with her, basically, because he is also handed a sentence here, and it's, of course, all the deaths, just all of them, for everything that they've ever done. But there's a little, asterisk on there in that the sentences are suspended to see how they finish the jobs and the assignments that they're currently on. So VISSER 3 is, of course, handed the Earth invasion to kind of continue doing his thing. And VISSER 1 gets a reassignment, and she gets shipped off to, as Coleman mentioned before, this other alien system that we just hear of now for the first time, the Anati system. And their battle there is kind of against the Andalites and the Anati. I wish they'd, go into a little bit more detail about this. Andalites versus Yeerks on a non-human world. That'd be a really, really good hashtag. I want that book. But that's the decision of the trial. That's the outcome. And VISSER 1 has a little bit of a moment here where she very easily could tell VISSER 3, hey, the Andalite bandits you're dealing with, straight up, they're human. But she doesn't. She keeps it to herself, kind of like a dick. She doesn't want to see VISSER 3 succeed. She wants to see him fail miserably, and that's why she withholds valuable information from him, even if it would help further the Yeerks' overall cause.
Well, right? I think it's a combination of her wanting to see him fail, but it's also she knows that if she gives that information to VISSER 3, he's going to track down Marco, he's going to track down Jake, Cassie, Rachel, and every single one of the Animorphs and kill them or infest them. And that'll just allow him to do what he wants to do, which is all-out war. And
with a couple of morph-capable bodies and VISSER 3's psychotic mentality, he'll have himself a cat army in no time.
Yeah, I mean, they made it pretty clear in this book that, or at least I thought so, that the Andalite bandits are really the only thing that is keeping them, or at least keeping VISSER 3 in check. With that group out of the way, he could probably argue pretty well to the Council of 13 that, hey, look, yeah, we're going to lose a couple million hosts, but, we got 6 billion, what's a few million? Let's just go in there, take it over, we'll have all these bodies ready to go. And deep down, despite VISSER 1, the roller coaster ride that was this book, and her, being pure Yeerk, and then finding humanity, and then falling back into the Yeerk, but still having a little bit of an attachment there, she still cares about her children. And even in the last pages, she does make mention of her wanting to see her daughter and her son again at some point, but she just knows it can't be now.
Yeah, there's a lot of complicated feelings bubbling under the surface of this Yeerk. This Yeerk named VISSER. we constantly refer to as VISSER 1, although she's been stripped of that title long ago.
It's not definite yet. All right, it was just temporary.
Like I said, it's an asterisk. This story should be called VISSER asterisk. But that's the end of it. I mean, that's the end of her character arc for right now. She's going to be shipped off to be dealt with later in the plot, and that's all we need to know about. But it was a fun as hell ride while it lasted, and I think we're ready to sort of dive into our reviewing segment of the episode of the podcast here. And I don't know how you guys want to do this, because we could give our individual takes on it, and I'm sure we'll do that, but at least for me, I mean, I feel fully comfortable in just admitting my complete adoration of this book, and I think it's not much of a surprise that this definitely qualifies as a 5 out of 5 coked up host bodies, and it's definitely one of my favorite books in the series. So we can just
like that. I don't think we need to go
format review our
yeah, we don't need to go
here.
Super in depth. I think you just summed up your thoughts really well, and it kept it short. So, and I don't want to strip Richard of the.
All right, good night, folks. Thank you for joining us.
No, just cut my wings off, guys.
No. I think I'm right there with you. This book is incredible. It's right up there with the Limbus Chronicles of me, that's my favorite book of the series. So this is number 2 for me. This is
So like a eulogy. Just say a couple nice words.
Yeah, if any book deserved a 5 out of 5, beautiful, beautiful, wonderful humanities, it would be this book. So that's easily what I'd give it.
There you go, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I know you guys skipped a couple of the ghost-written books, and I have read the series all the way through. This one does definitely stand above the rest for the most part. It is a different take on the series theme, which is, obviously it's not really involving the Animorphs as a group at all, with the exception of the couple of points that they did come up. And there's not a ton of action. It really is a political, philosophical sort of ride, and
it felt more
really
like Ender's Game than Animorphs.
It's very thought-provoking because Animorphs is a very gray sort of book series where you have this, war is a horrible thing. You have these kind of like young innocent children who gradually throughout the course of the series become these battle-hardened soldiers and that have to make decisions of life and death, and their characters and their personalities change because of that. And this book really dives into the philosophical part. Why do Yeerks do what they do? How does it feel to be in a host body, and the emotions that come from that and that kind of thing. So to keep it short, it's a great book. I love it. Definitely a must-read if you're a fan of the series. And I don't know, I'm not very good at the 5 out of 5 chlorine cupfuls of water sort of thing or whatever.
You nailed it.
There you go. You referenced the book. That's all it takes. And I'd like to expand on something you said about the theme of this book and maybe even the overall series. I think you can go as broad as to say the series is really about the ability of humanity to adapt to new problems and survive against all odds, especially those considered to be impossible. This book is all about that, about human struggle, human survival, what it takes to create life and be a part of a relationship and a species. A lot of deep thoughts, like you said, very psychological, low on the action, but really high concept. And that's the best kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, and honestly, I disagree with you a little bit on the themes. I would say that this series is, and that this book represents as well, it's all about humanity's ability to deal with trauma on a large scale.
That's part of a. That's a struggle, man.
Yeah, well, my word's better. It's that PTSD, that not being in a situation that you shouldn't have to handle, but who else is going to do it? These are the broad themes that bring us together when we were 12.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, now that we've completed this book, I mean, we were really looking forward to this for a very long time. Both Coleman and I doing this podcast ever since we started. We've been looking forward to these bigger books, and with this behind us, we still have a couple more to look forward to. Another Megamorphs, one that I haven't read. I don't think in its entirety, so I'm really looking forward to that one. Megamorphs 4,
so good.
Yeah,
it's so good.
And Limbus Chronicles, a classic favorite, and just the final countdown books. Really looking forward to that. But next Thoughtspeak, we are talking a kind of monumental book, The Mutation, one that I hear constantly ripped on the internet for just being bad. It's constantly referred to as the Atlantis book. Richard, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, have you heard any of this? The buzz surrounding this book?
The thing is, to be honest with you, despite me having read a ton of these, or all of these when I was younger. I haven't kept up with the community, so to speak. So I'm not really familiar with how much or how disliked books are.
Okay, but do you remember reading this book? The
absolutely.
quote-unquote Atlantis book, although it's not technically Atlantis. Spoilers for next episode.
I remember reading that one pretty vividly.
I was just excited to see that they were morphing orcas on the front.
Morphing Orcas kind of sounds like an awesome band name. Just throwing that out there. But this one was a book that I was so excited to get to. I actually went ahead and already read it. So I have complete knowledge of what I think of this book, and I'm not going to spoil that here. You got to tune in next time for that one, right?
Speaking of morphs you like to see, I remember you guys were talking about the polar bear morph.
Oh, yeah.
And how Cassie should use that as like her battle morph. I think she used that in this VISSER book. I think
you're right.
Morph.
Oh,
somebody was there in polar bear.
I think that was like the only time I can recall that she used that polar bear morph outside of that one book with the Vinbar.
That's because obviously VISSER was written completely just to fulfill my hopes and dreams. So,
well, actually, polar bear was referenced in the previous book, The Proposal, because Marco did a half poodle, half polar bear morph.
Oh, that's true.
I guess that counts. I'll give it half credit.
Anyway,
that's all I need.
I'd like to thank Richard for being a part of this. It's just these bigger books are better with 3 hosts in general, and you really you added a lot to this conversation.
Yeah, way to go, man! It's been a blast.
The opportunity, guys. Yeah, I mean, it's a series I'm very familiar with. It's something that's close to my heart. As I stated earlier in the podcast, I read these things for a good portion of my youth, and to be here, at the ripe old age of 31 and still see the community doing fairly well, and that you guys are out here putting podcasts out and keeping things rolling. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. Is there any websites you have or anything you want to plug while you're here?
No, I have nothing to plug. I am just a person that's been fortunate enough to be able to help support you guys and keep this thing rolling.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah, man, we really hope that you'll continue to listen, continue to be a fan and support us, and anything Animorphs related in general. This is all because you dedicated yourself to being an Andalite level subscriber on our Patreon, patreon.com/Thoughtspeak website. Our only Andalite, the only Andalite in our army. You're kind of our VISSER 3 right now. You know that?
Yeah, it's a rare commodity. But yeah, it's really appreciate
you guys better put out more often. Or I'm going to start chopping heads.
I've been waiting for us to be threatened on the actual show by a listener. So thank you for fulfilling that.
Thanks for being our first.
Well, yeah. Well, we've been supported by the fans, and we appreciate everything you guys do. So we're trying our hardest. I mean,
we're keeping at it. Our lives are constantly changing, expanding,
morphing,
and whatnots. Morphing. Oh my God, we're acquiring new forms. This isn't even my final form, in fact.
But if you want to help
what we'll do is we'll talk to the listeners, and I'll get more involved in the community, and if you guys don't start posting more, we'll go ahead and feed you to the Texans.
That makes sense.
Nice.
We'll be afraid of that. But yeah, if you want to help out the show, as I said, check out our Patreon, Thoughtspeak. You can find us on there pretty easily. We're on iTunes. Reviews really help out more than people think. That's how new people find us. I get emails every month talking about, hey, just found you guys and binging the show. I don't know how people are still finding us, but I think a good bit of it is somebody leaves a review on iTunes, we jump up in that standing, and anytime somebody searches, we get a little closer to the top of the list. And if you want to support us and fight for us as your favorite Animorphs podcast, leave us a review. It really helps us out. You can also find our website at thoughtspeakcast.com. You can email us at thoughtspeakcast@gmail.com. Facebook, Twitter, we're on both and are pretty active on there. Obviously, we're active on the subreddit, our Animorphs. So just love to see you on there. Any way you can get a shout out to us, we'll try to either read it on the air or talk about it, or maybe it'll inspire us on a future episode. So just love being a part of the community. So check us out wherever you can, and help us out however you can, and we'll just keep putting it out as quickly as we can.
It's what we try and do here at Thoughtspeak. We're gonna see this through to the very end. All the books and beyond.
Yeah, that beyond is really creeping up on us too. So we'll see what we do when we get up that.
It's anyway, gonna be exciting.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Richard. I'd love you to have it on a future episode too, if you feel like it. I don't know how this experience has been for you.
No, it's been fantastic. If the people don't dislike the what I had to contribute, then absolutely not. But I would love to have an opportunity to do a regular book review with you guys, because like I said, despite this book being amazing, I really love the actual main cast, Jake, Cassie, Marco, all that group, and I would love to be able to contribute on one of those.
Oh yeah, it's always fun to talk about the main cast and their relationships and everything they're going through. So definitely going to have to happen in the future.
So, all right. Well, thanks again. Hope you guys enjoyed our special VISSER episode. I think we went pretty in-depth on that, so glad to see another long episode. If you enjoyed this, check us out wherever else. Otherwise, I've been Coleman.
And I have been Mitchell. And I've been Richard.
And I've been your Andalite controller guy, Richard.
Have a good one, everybody.
Right on. Thanks a lot. See y'all.